Hi, I'm Amy Chappell from Ameroonie Designs, and today I'm here at Riley Blake Designs to show you how to make this strawberry block that's part of my strawberry mini quilt. It's a super fun pattern. It's one that can be upsized into a larger mini quilt or a table topper. And today I'm going to show you some tips and tricks for sewing together this super fun block. You can find the pattern in the link in the video description. I have all of my pieces cut out, but before we get started, I wanted to talk about a couple of tips for accuracy when you're working with small pieces and some things that might be helpful to get your block coming out just how you want. The first one is to prep for all of these little half square triangles. They're gonna finish at 1 inch, and so you're working with some smallish pieces. So I have a couple of tips to help with that. The first is I really recommend starching your fabric, especially the fabrics you'll be using for these small pieces before you cut them out. It helps them hold their shape, and when you're sewing in the angles and things, it helps keep those lines nice and straight. The other thing I really recommend is a quilter's clapper. After you've pressed your pieces down, set the clapper on top and let it cool, and it helps those seams lay nice and flat. Another tool that's useful is a small cutting ruler. It helps to give you guides so that you can keep your angles lined up, but also it's a lot easier to manipulate and move around when you're working with these small pieces. So we're going to get started building our strawberry block. We're going to start with the base of our strawberry, and we're going to do flip over corners, snowball corners, however you want to call them. So we're going to take our 2 background squares here, and we're going to flip them over, and we're going to draw a diagonal on the back side of both of those. I'm just using a mechanical pencil here. You can use whatever your marking tool of choice is. We're going to sew right on this line, so the markings are going to disappear, but you want to make sure that you're not using something that's like got a lot of really wet ink or something that might show through on the other side. So mechanical pencils are great. You could use a heat soluble or a water soluble marking tool for this as well. I like mechanical pencils because they give you a nice fine line, and it's not really dark and you don't have to worry about bleeding. Plus I have a lot of them at my house because I have a lot of kids at my house. So we always have mechanical pencils on hand. So I'm just going to draw my diagonal lines on both these. And then I am going to take my first one and I'm going to line it up on the bottom of my strawberry. Now, if you have directionality to your strawberry fabric, you want to make sure that you're putting these on the bottom of that, but I really recommend not using a directional fabric for these. Anytime you're working with angled lines, it's just so much easier if you don't have to think about directions and flipping things and stuff like that. So save yourself some trouble and choose non-directional fabrics. I'm going to place my background square right sides together on top of my strawberry fabric. And then I'm going to take this to my machine. I'm going to sew right on that drawn line. Now you can throw a pin in it or not. I'm usually not a pinner, but where I'm moving this to the machine, just going to hold them together. Okay, once I have that sewn, then I'm going to take my cutting tool or my cutting ruler here, and I'm going to measure a scant 1/4 of an inch. It doesn't need to be exactly a 1/4 of an inch, but I like to keep it a little bit thinner, but I don't want to go too narrow because you want to be able to press it open easily. So I'm going to trim away the rest of that corner here, and then I'm going to take this over to my iron. And I'm going to press open this seam. Now, pressing open the seams is one more tip I have when you're sewing these angles in order to keep that seam nice and flat. Then I'm going to just take my quilter's clapper and let that cool on there for just 1 second. And then we're going to repeat with the second side. So I have a step out here already done. It's already pressed open. So I'm going to take my second square and I'm going to do it. It's going to be on the same side, the same long side of my block that I sewed the first corner. And I'm going to, again, line it up right there. Sew right on that line, trim it, press it, and then I will end up with the bottom of my strawberry just like that with both corners sewn down. Once that's done, now we're going to move on to probably the trickiest part of this whole block, and that is adding our leaves and the top of our strawberry. You're going to need 3 squares for your strawberry, 2 squares of your leaf fabric, and 1 square of your background. Then I'm going to kind of repeat the same next step, which is to draw a diagonal line on the backs of all 3 of my strawberry pieces. Now this one we're going to do a little bit different, and instead of doing flip over corners, we are going to do 2 at a time half square triangles. So we're going to take our 1 strawberry piece and we're going to put it right sides together with one of our other squares, your background square, your leaf square. You're going to repeat this for all 3 of them. So we're going to put them right sides together, and then you're going to take it to your sewing machine and you're going to sew 1/4 of an inch away on both sides of that drawn line. And that is going to look just like this. So you can see I have my stitch line here and my stitch line here, and they're both 1/4 of an inch away from where I drew that first diagonal line. The next step is to take your ruler and you're going to cut the 2 right on that drawn line. So I'm going to cut those 2 halves apart, and then you'll see when I open this up, now I have 2 half square triangles. So again, I'm going to take this over to my iron. I'm going to press open this seam allowance here. So sometimes I'll just use my finger to kind of get in there, and then I'll use the iron to help kind of press that open, and then I like to just throw the clapper on there to help it lay nice and flat. And then you're going to have pieces that look just like this. So you're going to repeat that for all 3 of your strawberry pieces. So you'll have 2 with leaf fabrics, 1 with background fabric, have them cut apart and pressed. And now we're going to trim this down. So what I like to do is you want to do a couple of things here. You have a little bit of extra fabric, and this way they can be nice, crisp, sharp half square triangles, which is going to make this sew together so much more easily. But you also want to make sure that you're keeping your diagonal here at a 45-degree angle. So this is where using a smaller ruler like this comes in super handy. I keep track of the markings and make sure that they are lining up with that sewn line. The first cut that I'm going to do here, I want to make sure that I have some fabric on the outsides of my 1.5 inch line, because I want to be able to trim up both sides of my square here. So I'm going to line it up, take my rotary cutter, and I'm going to cut one side and then the other side of my square here. Then I'm going to flip it around and I'm going to repeat it. Again, I'm keeping track of this diagonal line and making sure they line up with the marks. And now I'm going to make sure that I have my 1.5 inch marks lined up with the edges here so that my angle is right and my sides are the right size. And now I'm going to trim up these last 2 sides. And this is nice in that it helps you get rid of the little dog ears that kind of poke out once you've pressed your fabric piece open, because you don't need all that extra fabric and you get it out of the way. And then you make sure that all of your squares are nice and precise. So once we have all of those trimmed up, you're actually going to end up with 1 extra half square triangle with strawberry and leaf fabric. You can just toss it. You don't need it. You need 3 half square triangles with background and strawberry fabric and 2 half square triangles with background fabric and strawberry fabric. Then we're just going to follow the diagram, follow your picture, follow your strawberry, and line those up the right way. And you just want to make sure that you are turning them. Again, this is where not using directional fabric really comes in handy, so that you don't have to worry about words being upside down. You're just going to line them up and then again sew all of these together to create your strawberry leaf block or section. It's going to look just like that. And then we just move on to our little strawberry stem piece. This one's really easy and straightforward. You have your stem piece and then 2 background pieces that are the same height. You're just going to sew them together, right sides together, using your 1/4 inch seam. Press them open. I do like to press the seam allowance towards the stem fabric. It just helps give nice crisp edges. And then that's going to be the top of your strawberry. You'll sew those 3 pieces together, and then we're going to add just a little bit of extra filler background fabric so that we have the spacing that we need at our sides, and then our strawberry block is done. Now all of the rest of these are just 1/4 inch seam allowances, pressed well. Again, if you want to starch those seams, especially when you're sewing this particular piece in, it's really bulky because you have a lot of seams on the back side of this one particular piece. So it's helpful to have it starched nice and stiff so that there's not a lot of moving and adjusting to any of the fabric as you're sewing those together. Once you have all of those pieces sewn, then you can add your borders to it if you're going to make the larger version or the smaller version, and your project's done. These strawberry blocks are really fun, add a nice touch of spring to your home decor, and I hope you'll enjoy making one. If you've enjoyed this tutorial, I hope you'll join me over on my YouTube channel at Ameroonie Designs, or you can follow me on Instagram or Facebook, also at Ameroonie Designs.